Que lo que mi gente, welcome to the breakdown episode on the Utah bikepacking trip. Here in this episode, I'm going to talk highlights. I'm going to talk gear that didn't work well, gear that exceeded my expectations, and then what I would do differently if I were to go back and do this route again. This is going to be a long, in-depth episode, but it's going to be the most information you'll get anywhere on the Stonehouse Lands Loop. Beginning with the highlights, day one. So me and my friends, we flew into Las Vegas, stayed with a friend there, and then we're planning to drive the 6 hours to the beginning of the loop at Temple Mountain. Salt Lake City is only 2-ish hours away from the start as opposed to 6, but Salt Lake City was a couple $100s more in flights, and we had a friend to stay with in Vegas. Then the morning of, we took off at about 7-ish a.m., thinking it'd take just, I think on the map it said like 5.5-ish hours. It ended up taking what felt like all day. We left at 7 a.m. We drove the 6 hours from Vegas, and instead of going straight to Temple Mountain, we actually drove to what would be mile 151 on the route. We cached water there so that we could have water for the final day. Got to the trailhead at like 5, and by the time we took everything off our bike, it was already almost 6 p.m. before we took off. Luckily, the first 2 or 3 miles are pretty nice before you get into the rough stuff. And what I didn't know, but now looking back, the first 20-ish miles are basically all really rough. And everywhere about this route, when you do research, it suggests bringing 3+ inch tires. This is definitely where you feel it, along with what I'll tell you about on day 3. But day 1 started off beautifully. Started off with the climb. The views were insane. We were all excited and pumped. Now, with the couple of hours that we had before sunset, we thought we'd be able to get a good 20-30 miles and maybe even get the full 40 to the first water stop and camp around there. I didn't know just how insanely rough that first bit was. Both the up has a lot of rocks, and the down, you're on the brakes, trying not to break your bike, especially with the fully loaded bike. All of us were on gravel slash like light mountain-ish bikes with Dune. He had front suspension, but he's the only one who had suspension. All of us were well below that 3-inch threshold that everywhere says you should bring. So day 1 was rough. So we only made about 8 miles on day 1, which is significantly less mileage than we thought just because of how rough it was. And then we camped at a river bottom. The river bottom was really cold. It seemed like a beautiful campsite. We didn't really have anywhere else to go because the sun was down already. But I would redo day 1 differently, but I'll tell you that at the end. Now day 2, as I mentioned, the first 20-ish miles are pretty rough. We only got about 9 miles on the first day. So day 2 started off with the exact same rough stuff. Now, after the beating that we took on day 1, all of us were kind of in shock as to what this would bring, because we thought it'd be an easy, 200 miles sounds like a lot, but if you ride your bike often, next thing you know, you'll be doing 100+ mile rides. And Chris and I actually met at SBT Gravel, where we both did 142 miles in one day. He helped me finish. It was a beautiful story, but 142 miles of off-road and gravel in one day. Then you look at a 200-mile course that you've given yourself 5 days to do. In all of our minds, it would just be this easy thing that we can go and do. And then we were talking about, well, are we gonna go skydiving at the end because there's so much extra time? Are we gonna go back to Vegas and hang out, maybe get a hotel, check out the show, all of this stuff? We made all of these plans of what we do with all of the extra time that we'd had. All of those plans went out the window when we only made it 8 miles on day 1. So day 2 starts off. The first 10 miles are again super rough, which took, I don't remember how many hours, but it was a lot of hours, like a significant amount of time to get through those first miles. But then you come out near this car where we took this picture at. It's some place that shows a car that's broken down. That's your sign that you're out of the rough stuff, at least for now. And honestly, there's not much rougher until you get to day 3, mile like 70-ish. So after mile 20-ish to mile 70 is all nice. We didn't know that. Again, I'm telling you this now. So 20-ish, 25-ish, we get to the car, we take a picture there, we hang out. Then we get to the turnoff where you can do water. So there's water on the front of this big hill and then water at the end. It's mile 25-ish at the front and mile like 40-ish at the back. But then when I'm looking at the map, we got to that point, we still had a decent amount of water. It was 2.5 miles downhill and then a 2.5 mile climb. But after all day of dealing with a bunch of rough stuff and a bunch of rough climbing, we opted not to go downhill for 3 miles and then climb up another 3 miles just to get water when there was water again in like 15 miles. So we didn't do that extra 5 miles and just decided to go. But this was the beginning of the beautiful roads. I didn't know how nice the roads were going to be, and it was such a welcome surprise because 2 days now at this point of just getting your teeth kicked in by hard, rough roads was not enjoyable. But you begin this climb up. We found a nice little lunch spot underneath the shade there, so there are plenty of spots there. It was nice road, so we were all excited. It was kind of a headwind, but it was fine because the scenery was stunning. We were finally on nice roads and able to actually cover ground. And then the descent into mile 40-ish for water. Oh, Lord. That was one of the most amazing descents I've ever seen. It was just flowy, fast. You didn't have to hold your brakes really. It was just long, but not too steep. And then the views, what you were looking at while you were descending, were out of this world. And everything that I'd heard about Muddy Creek up to this point was it would break your filters, you'd have no luck, you'd blah, blah, blah. So we get to mile 40, all of us are now out of water. We see this river, it definitely looks silty. Dune goes in, he grabs some stuff, he points it out that it looks silty, so all of us are kind of worried as to how well this will work. Yo, the Be Free, it just powered through that. It didn't look like it was slowing down at all. There was no issues with flow rate. I filled up 4.5 liters of water very easily, like very quick. It was easy to grab the water. And then that campsite was gorgeous. There was plenty of campsites available. It was quiet, it was warm over there, there was water right by there. So I'll touch on this a little bit later, but I would definitely try to make it there. That's like goal number 1, make it to mile 40. I don't know what mile 25-ish looks like, water down there, because we skipped that. So I don't know if that's as nice, but I still would opt not to, because 25-ish, and then if you camp there, you got to come up and then go back and pass mile 40 because the route goes through there regardless. So I would just do the extra 15-ish miles if you got the time, but we'll talk about that later. Then once you leave water, right, you're at the bottom of the basin. Then it's just climbing. It's just climbing to the top of this mountain. And although it's on really nice roads, it's climbing. And I didn't realize how much climbing it was because I was just so happy to finally have water and nice roads. But you're heavy with water, you're kind of into a headwind. Stuff is starting to get cold and really, really windy for us, and you're just up and up and up and up and up. Luckily, I'll talk about this later, but the carb mix that I had in my bottle, that's the first time I've ever ridden and done a full hard day while bikepacking without having a lot of ups and downs of bonks, just because I had enough fuel in me and constantly drinking this carb mix, which I'll talk about later, that it transformed my day. Like at some point I got a little bit tired because I think Christopher was feeling not the best day 2, so he was a little bit slower. I didn't want to wait, and I just wanted to like get my head down and churn and kind of keep in a zone. So I ended up blasting up ahead, still felt fantastic, and almost climbed the entire hill by myself. But the roads were great, scenery was awesome, the climb wasn't that bad, it was just long. Now this is where I started to get worried because we're starting to get up. I think we got near 7,000 feet. Like the top of that mountain is somewhere near 7,000 feet. And I did a bikepacking trip in Arizona with my friend Andrew, where we crested a mountain and then we tried to go down on the other side. It got dark real quick on us. A storm came. We had this camp at the top of this mountain. I lost stakes. I lost my stake bag. We were just stuck in this like really, really bad storm. And the little bit of signal that we had pointed to high winds, potential rain, potential storms. So we were all, I was at least kind of worried about what it meant to be camping above 7,000 feet because I didn't know what the top of that mountain looked like. But it was gorgeous up there. You climb, you do all that climbing, you get to the top, and then it's beautiful descents. And we were all kind of tired, and it was kind of perfect timing by the time we crested the mountain. And Dune found this nice campsite like behind a little rise in the mountain from where the wind was coming from. So we were sheltered from the wind. There was soft ground. It was warm up there, and we had plenty of firewood. So we had an excellent fire, stretched out, talked, hung out all night. Day 2, the end of it was fantastic. And then the beginning of day 3 was probably one of the best parts until we get to day 4. So beginning of day 3, we had a nice warm night. Everyone was tired from all the climbing the day before, so we slept great. But wake up, beautiful sunset, beautiful views from the top of the mountain, and then we start taking off. We have a tailwind, nice roads, and mostly downhill. Dude, it was amazing. Then next thing you know, you're on these nice roads, and I just remember Chris pointed, he's like, now we're going left. I'm like, hold up, what, why? That's like not into the tailwind, and that doesn't look as nice of a road. So we take this left, then it starts getting sandy. It starts, getting rocky again and ups and downs. We lose the tailwind. We hit this little cabin, which was pretty cool. It was a nice stopping point for the cabin. But then I remember we go down, again, some more sand, some more rocks. We start hitting that. I thought that was the bad sand. It was not. we see this sign that says Devil's Canyon.
Sounds lovely.
And that was basically the entrance into hell. I hated the next, I don't know how many miles it was, because on the map, it looks like you crest this mountain, there's some dips, and then you're mostly downhill until you hit water at 95-ish. So we had gotten to like mile 60 something around there. So I thought, all right, we have 20-ish miles of this nice roads before we descend down into water. And I thought it's gonna be great. I don't know how many miles we had of niceness, but then again, once you make that left and hit Devil's Canyon, dude, it was just so much worse. It starts off just with rocky stuff again, rocky ups and downs, which we had done. That's part of bike packing, that's cool. And then sand and sand and sand and sand. And then next thing you know, you're just in this river bottom that's super sandy and you can't push. Now, we hit a stretch of sand that was bad. All of us had to stop and take a second because it was bad with the headwind. But that wasn't the worst part of it. The worst part by far was just this river bottom that you're in for I don't know how long. And you're trying to figure out whether it's worth it to just walk, because walking is consistently slow, but at least you're staying consistent and an even amount of output of energy. Or you can hop on your bike and potentially go significantly faster, but then you hit this really deep sand spot and you mess up. Or you're pedaling there doing 400 watts, you know, going 1 mile an hour and just wasting energy. So it was just like mind numbing and messing. I hated it so much, so much. I hated that part. And it took like everything in me, all the suffering that I've done kind of has hardened me to the point where I knew it was going to be over eventually. I didn't have to get in a bad mood that would then ruin Dunes and Chris's day, but inside, I hated everything. The one shining light was we saw these amazing rams. I like to hunt, so you watch videos of these ram hunts and people thinking, man, this is cool, counting the curls, counting all this. I don't know if this was like a wild pack of the biggest rams in the world, but they all had massive horns, like massive, and they were all just climbing along this cliff face in front of us. And Dune and Chris saw it first and they stopped and pointed it out. And then I looked and I don't think they realized what we were looking at, but all the videos I've seen of all the hunting people hunting rams, they were big rams and they were beautiful and they just stopped one. I remember it like came up and just poised itself on this rock with its chest out and let me take a picture. And I'm like, yo, okay, big boy, flaunt your stuff, man. You got it, flaunt it. Then there's this beast of a climb out. But again, I was just in this mood of, I want to be done with this. I felt really good because of that carb mix again. It surprised me how well it worked. So I was able to just power up that climb, like past Chris and Dune. We crest that mountain and then everything on the descent was beautiful. Yeah, then that descent down, it started hailing on us with a cold headwind. So you couldn't enjoy the descent really because you were into a cold headwind. And I'm rolling, we're doing this thing. Then the landscape turns into like from brownish dirt to very, very red. And you look out and I remember seeing a patch of trees and I thought, okay, water's there. I can see it there. But the road went a different direction or it didn't go exactly there, or we passed that and we still didn't get to water. So that started getting a little concerning because I ran completely out of water. I remember I recorded something where I was like, well, I just took my last sip. I don't know when water is, but I hope it's soon. And then you layer on top of that the fact that everyone says Muddy Creek may not have water. And if it does, it may be unfilterable. So it's just this mix of I'm out, there may not be any, and if there is, I may not be able to filter it. Plus the cold wind, plus you're tired at the end of the day and all the climbing, everything like that just made it a really, really rough time. But we found the water, we were able to go down, and this Muddy Creek definitely lives up to the unfilterable name that it has. It was way grayer than mile 40. It was moving slower, which probably contributed to the more sediment that was in the water. But it took us about 2 hours to filter water for all of us because we all had to keep cleaning out our filters. It just kept getting clogged, it wouldn't push anymore, then you had to go and clean it out. Luckily with the Be Free, it's so easy to clean. I would take some of the clean water, put it inside of the sack and just shake it up. But I'll talk about that later, how well it worked. But I had to clean out the Be Free 4 or 5 times in order to filter 4.5 liters of water, which I've never had to do before. But you combine all of the sand and pushing through it with the rough headwind and the climb, and then filtering water for 2 hours. By the time we got done filtering, the sun was setting, so we needed a spot to camp. And everything, that's when the wind was really, really bad, cold, and we look around and it was just flat Martian dirt. There was nothing protecting you from the wind. It didn't look like any good campsite. We went and found 2 potential spots. Dune saw one, I saw the other. So we went and scoped those out. We chose one that kind of protected us from the wind, but it was, again, in a river bottom. There was no wood to make a fire. The wind protection was kind of there, but it was this weird sensation of, we were out of the direct, like, hard wind, but there was like this slow, ghostly wind that would just come, and while you're in your sleeping bag, just like take your warmth away slowly. So you never got warm at night. And we woke up the next morning with all of our water bottles completely frozen. Everyone definitely was cold. Like, definitely was cold that night, regardless of how much stuff you put on. Everyone was glad to be done with day 3. Everyone was glad to be done with that sand. And that, if you're doing it, once you get out of that riverbed, that is the end of the sand, and honestly the end of all the rough stuff. So I'm glad that the route is this way. I would not do the route clockwise. We went counterclockwise on the route for the 200 miles. Definitely do it that way, because you get all the rough stuff out at the beginning when you're freshest. So we packed up and then start this climb, which is helpful because it'll warm us up. Now, when you're climbing and once you get to the top, again, a whole ecosystem changes. I don't know how Utah does this. It felt like I was on 7 different planets throughout the whole trip. Then you get hit with an icy headwind. Like icy headwind. And it was just cold in your face for a like hard, fast, cold wind. You put on everything, even though you came up from the climb and you're hot, you had to put on everything because it was just stripping all the warmth out of you. And that was only about 5-ish miles that we had the really rough headwind. So if you don't have a headwind, that section would be glorious because it was beautiful scenery, huge open expanses. That was the like first part of the trip that I remember that just felt really, really wide open and jaw-dropping. But then again, we took this left and that changed everything. When I tell you the most pristine bike packing, it was really nice packed down dirt roads. It was a strong tailwind. The sun had come out, so it had warmed us up and I could finally feel my feet. So it was at least 20 miles of a slow downhill. So you didn't even have to pedal. The tailwind was just pushing you along on these beautiful roads. You could just sit there with your arms up, just coast for the full 20 miles. It was amazing. The only thing I'll say about this section is we did have a lot of what would be water crossings. So if there was a lot of water in the area, that would be rough. Amazing day 4. Day 4 is what you dream of when you're on a bikepacking trip. That glorious downhill, the tailwind, all that stuff brings us to mile 150-ish, 151 on the route where we had cached water. So we passed this campsite where you see a bunch of big motorhomes and stuff camped out, people with dirt bikes, people with big cars, all that camped out, and we had cached the water just a little bit past that. And Christopher had picked an excellent spot because it was out of the sun, so the water wasn't hot and didn't taste like plastic, and no one saw it to take it. So we had water, thank God. Then Dune does this crazy thing, man, of I figured, all right, how are we gonna get this water like in all of our bottles, drink it all, cook with it, and then keep some more for tomorrow morning? Dude, and then Dune, he just, I don't know how he did, like how he carried 40 pounds of water. He just took the 2.5 gallon containers. That's what we bought from Walmart in Vegas, came here, took the 2.5 gallon containers, shoved it into his bag, and then just starts riding off. And then Chris and I are just sit there like, who is this man that can just put 40 pounds of water just in his bike and take off riding? That is a Dune. But Dune puts his water in his bag. We start taking off. We didn't want to camp at the official campsite that was there with everyone because there was a lot of dirt bikes, there was a lot of generators. We ended up coming to this spot that was out of this world. So there was the riverbed that we followed for a little bit, and this was slightly elevated off the riverbed because we learned our lesson at this point. Don't sleep in the riverbed. It's way too cold and there's just this wind that travels through there like cold water. It was a little bit elevated from there, but still surrounded by mountains and protected. We had a nice fire. We got to climb to those top of those mountains and had the best view of the entire trip. And honestly, one of the best views I've seen of that type of scenery, and maybe one of the best views I've seen ever, but that's just a really bold statement that I'm not ready to make yet. But excellent view. It was really cool chilling on top of the mountain there with Christopher and Dune. Had a fantastic night because even though we had done the most amount of miles, it was the quickest that we'd cover that, and it was Probably the easiest day physically, not needing to deal with all the rocks and crazy climbing. But we had a great night, ate some amazing food, made a really nice fire, and then went to bed. That night was still definitely cold. There was this cold that came off the mountain for sure, but it was still better than sleeping in the riverbed. Hands down, by far, better than sleeping in the riverbed. Now, day 5, it started off cold. We had this fire there because, again, there was more wood. Started off with the fire. Then, although we had 50 miles, which is the second longest distance we would have done the entire trip, all of us felt like that's it, we're basically done with the route. So it was that mood pervade throughout the entire day, even when there was a lot of climbing. But day 5, if I look back on it and objectively, it was maybe the second or third hardest day, especially made difficult by the fact that we had only planned for 4 days of being out on the bike. Everyone had run out of food except me. I packed an extra day of food. Basically, I took that bag of food that I had that would have fed one person, split it between 3 grown men. it kept us going until the end. Then there's the whole river incident. Long story short, there is a way around the river if you don't want to go through it. Then we started seeing cars, we started seeing campsites, we started seeing things that was like civilization again. This is cool. I love this civilization. Then you hit some river bottom again. By this point, we're all dreaming about what type of food we want to eat. You start to see one car parked there, another one. Next thing you know, you hit this parking lot. You do this techie little climb up, and then you're on a road. And that road, glorious road. There was a lot of climbing on that road, but it felt really nice to be off of sand and onto a paved road that you could actually make headway on. So I think we had a headwind for most of the time that we were on the pavement, but none of us cared. We just wanted to get to the car to get some food. Then there's, at the end, you stop off and visit, what is it called? They want you to go do some crazy climb to see a uranium mined high stand shaft. Now, by that point we were all toast, and there's literally, like, you're coming up and there's this road that takes you straight to the car, or you have to go do this whole loop with a big climb back on gravel just to see a uranium mine thing. None of us cared enough for that. We were all hungry, out of food. We took that road and just made a beeline for the car. Now, last thing I'll say is keep something that's really yummy that won't melt in the car, because we were all starving by the time we got to the car. We had a little bit of water there, so we were able to drink some more water, but hit the car thinking, all right, let's go stop somewhere and get food, even if it's a fast food joint, a McDonald's, Burger King, whatever. Dude, there is nothing around there for a long ways. Like, I think we had to drive 70 miles before we hit a little town, even if you go like the wrong direction. So we wanted to head the 6 hours towards Vegas. There was nothing, like nothing. So we ended up driving to this little town that had this Chinese shop, because all of us thought, man, that some chicken and some noodles sounded amazing. It was some of the worst Chinese I've ever had in my life. I don't remember what it's called, but just don't get Chinese in the middle of nowhere, Utah. Now, overall, like, my opinion of the route was, it was very, very difficult, but there's a lot of warning about the right bike to bring, and the warnings are very apt. Now, for the gear that drastically underperformed, if you've been following this channel for a while, you know my love-hate, mostly hate relationship with this Apodura bag. It looks amazing, it fits my bike really, really well, but it broke way too easily a couple years ago. I sent it back to Apodura. You have to pay to send it back to Apodura for them to fix it, which is wild to me. Then they sent it back with what feels like no fixes. I still had what felt like the same issues, but I packed the bag because I was hoping it was fixed. The one side had problems before, but it's the side that doesn't have the big pocket. So I thought, all right, big pocket side at least works. That's the side I need the most. Something happened with this, and I get to the car and everything. This is where I kept all of the drone, a lot of the camera equipment, the mics, everything was covered in like a mud. So somehow all of the gravel, dust, and dirt had gotten into the bag, and then some sort of liquid also got in there. I think it was just from the cold and wet, like condensation was in there. So everything was just covered in like mud inside of this bag, even though this is supposed to be a waterproof bag with the correct zipper. Like, I can't even see what's wrong with it. It doesn't look like there's a broken part on the zipper. So needless to say, I hope to never use this bag again. And let me know if you have good luck with this Apodura stuff. A lot of ultra endurance cyclists use Apodura, so I love the look of this bag. I love that it's a women-owned brand. I love a lot of things. I want to love this bag so much more than I do, so let me know down below if this is a one-off experience, if you have a great experience with this bag. Apodura, if you're watching this, like, yo, let me know what's up, because some people on the previous video commented like, oh, you know, you gotta take care of your zippers more, blah, blah, blah. I've had this bag from Revelate so much longer than I've had this bag from Apodura. I've definitely overstuffed this way more than I did the Apodura bag. This zipper still works great. So I don't know what it is, but underperformed this bag, and I hope to never take this specific bag on a trip. If Apodura goes and sends me something else and says, we fixed XYZ thing, this is what's wrong with it, but this bag never again is going on a trip. Now for what exceeded my expectations. Item number 1 is the Katadyn Be-Free filter. This thing packs down to nothing, so you have no reason not to bring a filter on this trip. You have to carry basically all of your water or filter it, and carrying enough water for 4 to 5 days is probably not realistic. So this thing, not only was it a champ at filtering the silty water, but it's also super easy to clean. I mentioned before, you just take some of the clean water that you filtered, pour it back in here, close it, shake it up, swish it around, all that, and then this is clean and you can reuse it to keep filtering water. This was a lifesaver literally on this trip. I love this thing. I will probably never use another filter, but Katadyn Be-Free exceeded expectations. Next up, exceeded expectations, the Rene Hurst, which one are these? The Rene Hurst Oracle Ridge tires. These are 48 millimeters knobby tires. I'd never put something so big on my bike before, but I absolutely loved them. I usually run the Pathfinder Pros. They have the slick tread down the middle and something. These are amazing. I have to give it to Rene Hurst. I don't know what they did. I thought they're way overpriced and overhyped. I don't know if I would pay for these on a regular basis, but having them, I absolutely love them. There was, this tire right here had a puncture that I didn't know about. I thought it was just like a leaf had gotten stuck in the knobs. It made it the whole rest of the 5 days, plus the trip home, and still had air inside of it. So I am very impressed with how well these tires work. All right, next up. I have a Specialized Diverge that I took on this trip. And on the Diverge, there is this swap gauge in the middle of the bike. It's just a huge opening that's along the entire down tube of the bike. And that worked so much better than I thought. This was my first bikepacking trip where I've had that. And normally you have to have like a little thing here or a spot in your frame bag or somewhere for tools. I didn't have to, because it was all tucked in there. It was glorious. I put sealant in there. I had 2 tubes. I had all of my tools. I put my chain rag and the chain lube. All of it fit in there. Plus, I think I had some extra snacks and stuff in there because I have like the largest frame that they make, so I have a lot more room than most people. But it works so well for this bikepacking trip. The next thing, this drink mix, this high carb drink mix that I referenced before. Now listen, I've been on a lot of bikepacking trips, and it always just becomes this bonking and then too much food dance. Especially when you're doing 70 to 100 something miles a day, it's hard to eat enough calories to keep you like at a good baseline and keep you fueled. But with this, you can drink it. So I would have these little packets, and I carried 3 per day. So I would put 1 of these in a bottle, which is 360 calories and 90 grams of carbs. So that's 1,080 calories, 270 grams of carbohydrates that's just in bottles that's easy for me to drink. So, and what it would do is it'd keep me at like this nice baseline all day. I never felt hungry, but then I could also eat when I wanted to eat. So when it was time to stop and get lunch, I could eat and replenish some stuff. But I never like got to that point of I have no energy, I can't pedal anymore, I need to eat a ton, I need to like overeat to try to compensate. I never ran into that issue. So there's a link for this down in the description below, and there's a coupon code. I think it's like Kevin2088. I'll write it down on screen here if you want to try this stuff yourself. This is the 10-pound pack, but I'd recommend starting off with the 3-pound pack and 3 of these little packets. Check that link down below. Now the last section, what would I do differently if I were to do this ride again? The number one thing I would do differently is bring a fat bike. I'm bummed because just like the day before I left for the trip, I went to Atso and returned a fat bike that they had lent me. Now, I don't know if they would have let me do the entire trip with their fat bike, but that carbon fat bike would have been perfect for this bike. If you have one, or you have a friend that has one, or you want to experience this, the views are phenomenal. It's hard riding. It's like a really good level of adventure. Just bring a fat bike. Anything less than that, you're going to suffer an inordinate amount. And I don't know if it's worth the views and getting out there for the amount of suffering that you have. But if you have a fat bike, that'll change everything. So I would bring a fat bike and then bring a full frame bag just to be able to carry more food and water down low. So I don't know if I could get like a 3-4 liter bag just at the bottom of my bike where it's at the lowest center of gravity. That'd be awesome. And then stuff more food and all the electronics and stuff in the top part of the frame bag. That'd be clutch. Then what I would do is swap some gear. So a few videos ago, I posted something that Revelate sent some gear for me to try out, and their feed bag, I think that's what this is called, it worked fine. There isn't anything wrong with the bag itself. It's a really high quality. It doesn't feel like it's gonna break down ever. I'm just so enamored with the Apodura food pouches, especially the opening and closing system. You have to grab this little loop to open it, and then you have to grab this thingy to close it. Those are so close to each other. When you're on a really rough, bouncy terrain, it was just harder than I would like to grab this and do it. Not hard. Hard is not the right word. This is a great bag. I just think this is better. The opening and closing system of this is better. I like how deep this pocket is. It just feels, I mean, the shape is a little bit different, and I personally just like this one better. So that's one change I would make. I would swap the Apodura food pouch for the Revelate feed bag. The next swap I would make, I always bring a sleeping bag liner when I'm camping. It just extends the life of your sleeping bag, keeps you a little bit warmer, separates you from your funk from your sleeping bag. Anyways, I brought the Outdoor Vitals. I forget what this is made out of, some like plastic neoprene or poly something. I would swap this out for the Glacial Gear Merino wool liner. This one, at first, honestly, I thought it was just significantly bigger, but it's not. It is definitely heavier, and this definitely costs a lot more than this. But yo, the material of this, it would have kept me warmer at night. It would have reduced how much sweat I had on me when I woke up, because I found whenever I use this liner, I wake up like fresh. It keeps me warm but allows the moisture to go out, versus every single night on this trip I woke up with a lot of sweat, especially between my legs, even though it was cold at night. So merino wool liner for the win. Next change I would make, I didn't bring any underwear or enough thick socks. I didn't know how cold it was gonna be. I figured Utah, desert, it's, you know, maybe cold at night, but in the day it'd be warm. It was just cold the entire time. Like, I never went into a t-shirt. The entire time I had some sort of long sleeve something. So I would bring a set of underwear and then another set of thick socks instead of the thin socks that I brought. Then I didn't download the Utah map to my Wahoo. And if you've never had this happen to you before, if you don't have the map downloaded and you're trying to route it, the battery on your Wahoo just dies so much quicker, like really, really fast, like in a couple hours type fast. So especially on day 2, Wahoo kept dying. Then I never downloaded the map. So just download the map ahead of time wherever you're going if you have a Wahoo. And the last thing I would do is I would change up the order in which we did things in terms of camping. So we got to the trailhead pretty late, and I thought it'd just be better to get any miles in and then camp and keep going. I would redo that, like, for sure, because we have water there. What I would have done is camped at the trailhead and then done as much as I could to get to mile 40 the next day, because it's just different. That campsite at mile 40 is so nice, so nice, and there's water set up about every 40 to 60 miles. So if you could keep on that, do 40 the first day, because there's really rough 20, so you'd have to wake up early, get that rough 20 done, chill at mile like 25ish. If we need to get water, get it there, and then camp at 40. Then after that, you have water again at like 95ish, and then 151, you know, you cache it. We cached it at 151ish. So every 40ish to 50 miles. That was the initial plan going in but it just took so much longer to get there. It was way harder to do those first 40 miles than we thought. So save a significant portion of day one to get through those first 20 miles. And then after that, you should be able to stick on the 40 to 50-ish miles a day. That's everything you need to know about the Stonehouse Lands Loop. If there's any questions that I didn't answer, let me know in the comments down below and I'll get that answered for you. It's an amazing loop. It's very, very hard. But if you have the right bike, I think definitely worth it. Thank you to Seth from the Tipsy Rider who set up this route. I really appreciate you setting this whole thing up. I enjoyed this. Chris and Dune, thanks for being amazing trip partners on this trip. If you like this video, hit the like button down below. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And hasta la próxima, mi gente. Nos vemos.